One of the most significant things that's happened in light of our culture is that most people are struggling to find their sense of meaning. Certainly people who are agnostic or atheistic or just describe themselves in a non-religious stance are desperately on a search for meaning about their own lives. This is the nature of this word we call wanderlust, this search for meaning. All of us are on this journey to try to identify, what does it really mean to be human? What does it really mean to be alive? What are the point and the purposes of my life? And even as young Christians, many of us have actually lost the value of discovering how to find meaning in Christ and in Christ alone. And this idea of a secular culture that says there's nothing transcendent in the world, there's nothing supernatural in the world, has actually severed this tie inside of us, this place where you and I were meant to only find meaning in Jesus. That's what it's like to have a creator. We respond to our creator because our creator defines our sense of meaning. Our creator points to our reason for existence. Our creator points to the purposes of our lives. And when you cut that cord between you and your creator, you are lost and you don't know how to find a deep sense of meaning in your life. But what happens in humans is even when they stop believing in a God, or even when you live in a society that stops believing in God, it doesn't actually turn off your ache for meaning. It's part of being human is longing for the deep sense of meaning in your life. But when you can no longer turn toward God to find your sense of meaning, what do? Well, most people go directly to two places. We search for our meaning in our vocation, in our job, and in our relationships. And the problem is we're trying to find divine sense of purpose in places that can't actually handle it. So many of us actually look to our job, we look to our vocation to try to find a sense of meaning about who we are. This is why so many young leaders are drawn to jobs that make a difference, are drawn to jobs that make a change. And so many young Christians are looking to try to find themselves in pastoral ministry or in missions or social justice or these different jobs that have a different sense of meaning. And that's a great thing. I pray that every person that is watching this finds a job with a deep sense of purpose and meaning. But what we have to understand is this: we're actually looking for something that only God can satisfy in a job. And when we're actually telling our vocation that our vocation is what makes us meaningful, if my job is good enough, if my job is meaningful enough, if my job is exciting enough, if my job travels enough, if my job does all of these things I want it to do, somehow I'm going to satisfy this ache for meaning in my life. The truth is we are lying to ourselves. The only place that can satisfy our ache for meaning is Jesus and Jesus alone. And when we actually look for meaning out of our job, we're actually never going to find it, and we're going to become quickly dissatisfied with jobs that are good and right because we're putting divine purposes on them that they can't actually handle. And the second place we look for meaning is actually in our relationships. This is why philosophers call marriage secular salvation. We've come up with this idea that we're looking for the perfect marriage, for the perfect spouse, where they have every single idea that we want in a marriage. They look a certain way and they act a certain way and they make us feel a certain way. And we've bought this idea of perfection, that maybe in marriage I can find the perfect relationship that satisfies my ache for meaning. The truth is that marriage doesn't exist. I love the way Timothy Keller puts it, that marriage was not about helping make you happy. Marriage is about helping make you holy. There's a beautiful thing to marriage, a beautiful thing to covenant partnership, but it can't actually satisfy the deep ache and meaning of your life. Only Jesus can do that. But it's not only in how we pursue marriage, it's also how we pursue relationship. We've actually perverted the concepts of friendship and community because we're searching for meaning out of our friendships. We like to be friends with people who are popular. We like to be friends with people of influence. We like to be friends with people who advance our own name. And instead of actually having honest and sincere relationships, we're actually manipulating the people around us simply to try and find meaning in our own life, because being around people we like makes us feel better about ourselves. And ultimately, what we're doing is we're putting, again, divine purposes on friendships and relationships that simply can't handle it. And so what happens, if you can imagine inside of you that every human being has this ache for meaning, has this hole inside of their spirit that can only be satisfied by God, and it is an ache that exists inside of every single human being, and suddenly we try to take an idea like our vocation, an idea like our relationships, and we try to satisfy that ache for meaning. What begins to happen is that hole almost gets filled with these two things that can't satisfy it, and they begin to bump up inside of us. And this is why we're a generation that's plagued by anxiety, plagued by depression, plagued by doubt, plagued by insecurity, plagued by self-hatred. Because when you are actually trying to find meaning in your life by things that can't satisfy it, ultimately the only conclusion you can come to is that you're the problem. This is the reason why other people's lives are advancing farther than yours. This is why other people's lives seem to have meaning of their own. Somehow they were able to find it, and you were never able to. Instead of realizing nobody can find it in and of themselves. You can't self-create meaning. No one can self-create meaning. We can only find meaning from Jesus and what he does for us. It is actually in our identity that we are imago Dei. We are image bearers of God, created in the image of God, that we are beloved by God, no matter who we are. The fact that we are his adopted sons and daughters, even when we're his enemies, we are radically loved by God. But then it's also in that place when we give our lives to him through salvation and actually become part of his family, that we are adopted in, grafted into his family. This is the place we find our meaning. It is in our Creator and our Creator alone that gives us everything that we're aching for. In Colossians 3:3, it talks about how our life is hidden in Christ. Paul uses this phrase, and I think for us, we could say our meaning is hidden in Christ. Everything about who we are is actually satisfied by the eternal realities of who Jesus is, and we live our lives in response to the meaning that he gives us. Ancient Greek philosophers would talk about this idea, Plato, Aristotle, many of them, that there was this idea called the Logos. The Logos was an ancient Greek concept that there was something other than us, and the whole meaning of life was trying to find this Logos and defining your life by it. And once you found this Logos, found this transcendent other, found this meaning in life somewhere out there, you lived your life in response to this Logos, and you would find satisfaction and meaning. This is why the Apostle John, when he begins the Gospel of John, says, "In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God," referring to Jesus. John was saying there is that transcendent other out there. There is that thing that satisfies your ache for meaning. But it's Jesus and Jesus alone. Without him, we will always be in a constant place of wanderlust. But Jesus can satisfy the deepest ache of meaning in our lives.